Welcome, friend, to a soft corner of the evening where the air is unhurried and the ground holds quiet stories. Imagine yourself at the edge of a meadow as the day folds itself into dusk, the grasses breathing slowly, each blade tipping a small glimmer of pale light. Tonight, we drift together into something gentle and patient. The unhurried life of a meadow's seed bank, the calm archive beneath your feet. If the quiet of this place helps you relax, I invite you very softly to like this video and subscribe so you can find your way back here whenever you need. You can also let the playlist in the description play on in the background, carrying you smoothly into rest whenever you're ready. What city country are you watching from right now? You find yourself breathing at an easy pace, and with each breath, the meadow deepens. There is the faint green scent of crushed stems, a suggestion of warm soil cooling under night air, crickets stitching a simple rhythm somewhere just beyond the nearest clumps of grass. The world above ground feels familiar. Stalks and flowers, moths leaning into late blossoms, the occasional hush of wings. Yet, beneath the surface, wrapped in darkness and a gentle hush, lies a different meadow, a meadow of possibilities stored in miniature. The seed bank is not a vault with locks or alarm systems. It is a mud-brown quilt, loose and breathing. It is a soft library of asleep intentions. A seed bank is a patient memory, a quiet reservoir of the past and the future, resting in grains of sand and clay, in small pockets of air and moisture where time seems to move in a long, smooth curve. Imagine the soil as layers of subdued textures like folded cloth, dark and tender. In the top centimeters, there is the busy world of falling leaves and grazing insects. A little deeper, there is calm, crumbs of earth the size of lentils, crumbs so stable they hold tiny arches of space between them. The air in those spaces is gentle, not rushing, and the moisture clings in films along the mineral surfaces. Some seeds hide right there in that balance of air and water, a thin veil over their coats. They are small, many of them very small, so light that they move when a worm passes, or when a raindrop arrives from the sky and then lives inside the soil as a spreading pulse of coolness. Seeds resting in a meadow's soil are shapes of patience. Some are rounded and glossy, as if polished by the slow tumbles of time. Some are lightly ribbed, covered in bewilderingly small hooks or hairs that once clung to a passing animal. Some have a dark, smooth coat that keeps water out as if it were a gentle promise. Inside, tightly folded, is a thread of a plant, an embryo with a faintly curled root and a hint of tiny leaves, all pressed into quiet. Round it, a store of food, a pale starch or a fat droplet waiting to be redistributed into growth. And around that, a coat, more than fabric, more than shell, a layer of chemistry and structure that listens to the world. A seed coat will pass or block water as conditions allow. It will soften in cold. It will crack when scraped by the rough mineral edges of a moving soil. It will wait for the steady retreat of winter or the light touch of warmth that says spring is entering the air. You can feel that you are not intruding. The meadow does not require urgency. The gentle rhythm continues. You pass your fingertips through a handful of soil in your imagination and feel 1,000 small shapes that you cannot see. and among them, perhaps a dozen tiny seeds that came from last summer's flowers or from a summer many seasons ago. Meadow seed banks are not dramatic hordes. They are steady inflows and outflows, a calm arithmetic of seeds arriving and seeds stirring into life, year after year. Some species send many seeds into the bank, and those seeds remain viable for a stretch of seasons, sometimes a long stretch. Gentle years stacking themselves like quiet pages. Others pass through the bank quickly, waking at the first good rain and the first good light. The composition of this hidden community is always changing, but its motion is slow, like the way shadows turn at twilight. Before a seed becomes part of the bank, it travels. You can follow a single seed as it leaves a flower head at a measured moment. Perhaps it is a light, ivory seed, carried a short distance by the long breath of a meadow wind. It floats, it turns, it sinks into the green and leans into a kib of stems. Perhaps it falls exactly there, or perhaps it rides a fragment of spider silk and drifts a little farther. Another seed falls heavier, with no wings to speak of, just a dark coat that drops along the plant's own shadow, settling among the plant's own feet, so to speak, where the debris of last year lies soft and forgiving. Some seeds travel by fur carried by the passing ankle of deer or the plush pant of a fox. Their tiny hooks are quiet hands that hold, then let go. Some ride within a bird or a small rodent, and their coats are smoothed by a journey through digestion, a journey that can be gentle in its effect, taking away the hardness that blocked their path to water. Others are gathered intentionally by ants, who carry them away for a small morsel at the seed's surface, leaving the rest in middens, tiny ant-curated planting sites of surprising safety. Rain is almost a percussion, but softly played. Each drop arrives with a low tap, and seeds shift mildly with the stirring of the thin streams that form and seep through the litter. It is not an aggressive process. It is like being nudged by sleep itself. Seeds roll and lodge where micro-shadows make cooler zones, where small dimples in the soil catch a film of water longer than the ridge beside them. Some seeds will sit on the surface, held by a spider-laced mesh of stems. Others will move with the tiny currents down into pore openings and then further, settling into shade where the sun never reaches directly. If the soil is grazed lightly, hoof prints collect seeds in their clean edges. And when the hoof prints fill with water, those small bowls become nurseries for silhouettes of green that will appear when the time is right. The gentle rhythm continues. Dormancy is a kind of listening. A seed in a meadow seed bank rests beneath layers of soil cues, monitoring the world with chemistry rather than with eyes and ears. Temperature moves up and down over each day and over each season. Moisture arrives and drifts away. The soil breathes oxygen slowly and holds carbon dioxide in micro pockets that come and go with roots and microbes. For many seeds, light is a message, not to grow a stem, but simply to register a fact. Tiny receptors notice the ratio of red to far red light that leaches down through litter. A high red signal may mean a gap above, an opening where competition is low and sunlight will be enough to sustain a tiny new life. A low red signal whispers that tall stems stand above, that the world is crowded and it may be wise to wait. Some seeds ask for cold, a stretch of winter, as a gentle form of reassurance. Stratification, that long, quiet chill, maintains their calm until the cold has done its work, after which their internal locks slip into a receptive position. Then, when the spring warms the soil, a different enzyme murmurs, a different pathway unlocks, and the seed understands that patience can be resolved into action, slowly, carefully. Other seeds prefer a different sequence: warmth, followed by a cool period. Infinite soul variations that nature provides without haste. There are seeds whose coats are physically resistant, as if the world must knock politely and then gently insist before water is allowed in. The world does that in small, patient ways. Soil particles scrape the coat over months. Freeze and thaw reach in with microscopically expanding crystals, not to damage or harm, but to widen a pathway little by little. In the belly of an earthworm, a brief ride changes pH and softens a surface. In the midden of an ant, a seed rests among tiny carved fragments of plant stems and soil pellets, where subtle microbial films ooze into cracks and polish away hindrances. There is no rush, only the steady work of time. Small lives intersect here. A seed bank moves with the choices of beetles who gently mouth seeds as food, with rodents who cache for later, forgetting some and inadvertently planting them in the most perfect pocket of soil. Birds, pecking softly in the evening, tip seeds into crevices where they will sleep through winter, spared the shrinking dryness of the surface. Fungi lay down networks like threads too thin to see, and when a seed wakes and sends out its first delicate root, those threads may become partners, offering minerals for carbon in a mutual trade that often begins right here, one of the first relationships a young plant enters. This web is not loud. It is a soft conversation that might last a lifetime for the plant, a mycorrhizal bond formed in the very first days, shaped by the composition of the seed bank that fed the meadow, and the meadow that feeds the seed bank in return. As seasons turn, the content of this hidden library changes its emphasis in step with the sky. In autumn, seed rain gathers. Heads that once held petals now hold dry maps of how seeds were built, and those maps crumble into the wind's hand. It is a busy time above ground, but a quiet time below, a time when the top centimeter of soil receives a new layer of possibilities. Later, as frost arrives, the surface grows firm, and the seed bank, protected by the softness of its cover, endures temperatures that move in shallow waves from night to day. The seeds feel this not as discomfort, but as information. Cold stores are filled and drained in their biochemistry. Some seeds begin simple, low-level metabolic processes, the faintest tick of metabolism, recognizing the gentle sway of the calendar. Winter is not absence. It is a gentle caretaker, a season of calm conditioning. When spring begins to relax the cold, water begins to move differently. Snowmelt spreads cool dampness, or spring rains arrive in even soft events that linger rather than rush. Soil pores fill, then drain, creating cycles of oxygen and moisture that sweep over the seeds in slow pulsations. This combination of renewed air and reliable water is, for many species, the delicate boundary between waiting and waking. Germination is not explosion. It is a slow invitation. Water enters, the seed swells, the coat loosens with a soft seam. Inside, hidden chemistry reorganizes stored sugars and oils into mobile forms. Enzymes awaken like staff in a library, moving quietly with purpose. A radical, the young root, presses with patient determination and leans into a pore, moving through darkness toward moisture. Later, only when it is ready, the upward growth begins. An arch of stem, first pale, then green at the slightest hint of light, through a hairline crack in the soil. That crack might exist because a worm moved and left a passage, or because the soil shrank a fraction, or because a hoof disturbed the top layer weeks ago and left a subtle line. Tiny causes pile into gentle effects. Nothing needs spectacle here. If the little stem meets resistance, it slows, it waits, it uses the stored resources carefully, and then, when a cloudless morning warms the surface and dries the crust, the plant can lift past that last barrier. Then comes the first intake of sunlight, that quiet moment when a pale leaf learns green, and even that transformation is more like an exhale than like a flash. The gentle rhythm continues. In these first days, the new seedling draws water in small sips and meets neighbors invisibly. Pen-type roots trace thin arcs to find spaces and resources. Mycorrhizal threads meet the root tips, offering phosphorus or nitrogen in exchange for carbon that will be made from light. Even then, the seed bank is at work, because every new shoot is also a participant in the next season's seed rain. The loop is patient and complete. The diversity of a meadow seed bank is a mirror of histories. This meadow may have been grazed lightly for decades. It may be cut for hay when summer matures, but before seeds of certain grasses fully shatter, or it may be left to lay. These patterns write themselves into the bank. Some species do not invest in a persistent bank at all. Their seeds rarely last beyond a year or two. They prefer to scatter widely and germinate promptly in the first good season. Others are storytellers of the long view, relaxing into several years, sometimes many years of quiet viability. They are like judicious savers, investing in a future that might be drier or shadier, warmer or cooler, or otherwise changed by time. This is often called bet hedging by ecologists, but in the calm vocabulary of the seed bank, it simply means that the meadow is prepared to greet whatever the next chapters may hold. You might imagine the meadow as a mosaic, even if you are lying still. Microhabitats vary the way threads vary in a woven cloth. Near the hedgerow, shade arrives earlier, and dew lingers longer. Seeds that prefer low light collect in those margins, added to by the birds that perch there and tip their beaks, letting small seed fragments fall. In the center, where wind is more open and sun slides across without interruption, the ground is a little warmer and perhaps a little drier. The shallow hollows made by roots lifting and then rotting hold pockets of finer sediment and hold water longer after a rain. Those are nursery spots favored by species that need consistent moisture in their first days. The undersides of abandoned mole mounds are sandy and drain quickly. The footpaths of rabbits resolve into compacted strips, which are tougher to enter, but less likely to be invaded by deep roots, leaving sparser cover and more light at the soil. Even without seeing them, you can feel the movements of the small agents of burial and return. Earthworms swallow soil at the surface and deliver it deeper as they move. Then they bring it back up, casting tiny mounds that curve like punctuation marks upon the meadow. Each cast is a mix of mineral and organic matter, and in that mixture, seeds are rearranged. Ants collect seeds with little snack-like attachments called eleosomes, carrying them to nests where the attachments are eaten and the seeds are left to bide their time in a well-protected home. Beetles and other invertebrates rework the soil, sometimes consuming seeds and sometimes moving them without a bite, simply by walking and pushing and living their daily lives. The gentle rhythm continues. Over seasons, the bank is stirred countless times without ever feeling hurried. The chemistry of the soil quietly frames this life. pH rises and falls in small bands from the roots of particular plants, where exudates flow and shape local conditions. Nitrates appear when microbes process organic matter, especially after modest disturbances that allow oxygen to penetrate and speed those processes for a while. For certain seeds, elevated nitrate is an honest signal that the canopy above has thinned, that a small opening exists, and that the risk of emerging is lower than it might otherwise be. There are seeds that even respond to the tiny signal of smoke, a whisper-like chemical that sometimes arrives after a controlled slip of fire through dry grass. In some ecosystems, those smoke cues are clear and strong, and seeds respond as if hearing someone call their name in a low voice. In a temperate meadow, the signals are often more subtle, folded into the general chemistry of ordinary seasons, less a shout than a nod. Light is a messenger even underground. When a hoof scuffs away litter, the soil is briefly more exposed to the sky, and when a seed is near enough to the surface, photons can make their way to it, traveling through thin layers. The seed measures ratios of wavelengths in the red and far red bands, a method plants have used for ages to detect shade cast by other plants. The seed does not have a brain. It has proteins that change shape when light arrives, shifting the balance of signaling inside the sealed microroom of the seed. That balance lowers the threshold for germination or raises it, depending on what the ratios say. If there is too much far red, the seed reads that as shade, and waiting remains the better choice. If red light is enough, the balance tips toward action. In the calm mathematics of a seed bank, there are arrivals and departures. Ecologists write equations for these flows, but the equations are not required to appreciate the gentle logic. Seed rain adds to the bank each year. The bank loses seeds to germination, to consumption by animals, and to ordinary decay. Every species has its own rates for these movements, a set of habits or tendencies that we call life history traits. Some seeds are abundant but short-lived, flooding the bank and then fading. Some are scant but long-lived, accumulating in slow layers. The combination creates a stable diversity that can return the meadow to balance after a year of heavy grazing or after a wet summer in which grasses grew tall and limited light near the soil. Think of it as a slow breathing of the plant community, the breath measured not in hours, but in years. The gentle rhythm continues. If you close your eyes now, the meadow grows larger in your mind, and you begin to meet some of the individuals in this hidden community. Imagine a little oval seed of plantain, dark and subtle, with a coat that holds water out until it has cooled enough times to be convinced of winter. It rests just below the surface in the layer where roots move. Imagine it taking in a thin film of water one morning, plumping slightly but not yet breaking its seam. Imagine how, with a few cycles, its reserve of patient chemicals shifts, the enzymes that will cut stored starch into soluble sugar gradually accumulating. The seed does not know a calendar date. It knows enough cycles that whisper softly that the hour is becoming right. Beside it, a grass seed lies narrow and elongated. Many grasses prefer not to rest long in the bank. They aim for the quick growth into light where their leaves can harvest the sun. They moderate dormancy in a smaller arc. They can be quickly convinced by a moist period and a touch of warmth. In some grass species, their presence in the seed bank is more like a short-term savings account than like a long-term endowment. And yet, even grasses that do not remain long contribute in moments, rounding out the mix of the possible. Across a small distance, in a slightly wetter pocket, perhaps a sedge seed waits, accustomed to the cool of low spots in a small crack created when a root lifted and left behind a hole. A seed of a wildflower leans, its coat faintly textured. Seeds in the carrot family often have little ridges along their sides, adornments that held on to movement in the windy weeks when they left their umbels and sailed. These ridges now help the seeds settle in place. The meadow hears 1,000 such small stories, and the stories play out slowly and without urgency. You may picture the ways people study seed banks, and even in that, the tone is gentle. A researcher kneels in the meadow with a small metal cylinder, a cora, and presses it into the seal with steady hands. A column of earth rises out, a little tower of dark crumb flecked with straw-colored fragments. In the lab, the soil is spread thinly in trays and watered lightly under soft lights, a method without loud accelerations. Over weeks, seedlings appear in a measured trickle, each emerging plant counted, noted, and then allowed to grow just enough to be identified before it is removed. Another set of trays might be allowed to dry to simulate a shift in weather, then rewatered, coaxing a second wave to appear. The result is a portrait of what sleeps beneath, a calm portrait that is never complete and never needs to be. The meadow keeps details to itself, as it should. A seed bank often reveals the past buried in the present. If land was once plowed and then allowed to return to meadow, seeds of species that preferred disturbed ground might still appear in a sample taken years later. These pioneer species have seeds that remain viable in deep sleep. When the soil is turned again, or when a rabbit scrapes the surface, a few of these older seeds wake and step into the light for a short while, as if calling out to a former time. Over decades, the signature of the past fades as new seed rain writes new text over the old, but traces remain in corners and in depths. Depth, too, has meaning. Most seeds in a meadow bank gather in the top layer, within the top 5 centimeters or so. It is there that they can respond to the cues they evolved to understand. Light through litter, moisture that comes and goes with weather, Rather than with groundwater, temperature changes that move quickly. Deeper layers hold fewer seeds, but those seeds are sometimes of species whose seeds are very small and very long-lived. Seeds that collected slowly, soil covering them millimeter by millimeter. In a deep layer, the world is stable. Temperature moves in long arcs, and water is often present in a soft but constant way. Seeds down there are a reserve for unusual moments. If a gopher lifts them, if a flood shifts sediment, if Cade stick is passed and someone restores the meadow to a vibration of diversity it has not held for a while, the seeds may be there to assist. The year moves on in this story at a quiet pace, but there are disturbances too, and they, like everything else here, can be gentle. Grazing performed sparsely creates small gaps and hoofprint pools that become micro-gardens for seedlings. A careful mowing, time to avoid cutting before most seeds are ready to disperse, can spread hay that includes ripened seeds, carrying them across the field in a soft, human-facilitated rain. Traditionally, people used to green hay meadows, moving cut material with its seed heads to places they wanted to enrich with diversity. The seed bank receives these gifts and incorporates them. The hay lies, breaks, its seeds nestle into the ground, and over the next years, the bank reflects the new presence. People can also remove the top layer of soil from one meadow and place it onto another, transplanting a piece of the seed bank itself, like moving a paragraph from a book into a chapter where it belongs. The quiet methods are often the most effective. They match the slow nature of this underground world. You can see how this archive helps the meadow adapt to weather that shifts from year to year. A dry spring favors plants that can germinate with little water, or that can wait until a rare, gentle rain arrives. A wetter spring supports species that prefer to begin in damp conditions and that can endure being lightly shaded by early growth. The seed bank provides options because it does not insist that all seeds respond at once. It spreads risk across time. Some species even cycle their internal readiness during the year, a process called dormancy cycling. In this, the seed's sensitivity to cues moves up or down with the seasons, so that in winter it is robustly asleep, in spring it is easily woken, in midsummer it slips back into reluctance to avoid emerging into a potentially dry and dangerous time. The seed bank is not static, it breathes in long sighs. In your imagination, walk a few paces to the meadow's low edge where a meandering stream has curved its way over years. In flood, water leaves silt in thin layers on the meadow's skin. Seeds float in that shallow water. Some have hairs or papery edges that keep them near the surface. Others soak and sink. When the flood withdraws, a mosaic of seeds is left behind, some stranded in drifts of fine silt, some caught in the roughness around clumps of grass. A new set of options lays down over the old. Life above ground returns in ordinary ways within days, but underground, the rearrangement will have effects for a slower season. Many of these seeds will not germinate that year. They have joined the bank, and their patience is untroubled. If you listen closely to the soil, as the night continues to settle, there is the soft prelude to a new day that you feel rather than hear. Roots of established plants keep up a tiny flow of sugars to lived-in places in the soil. Microbes respond in ways that feel like warmth and closeness, invisible but everywhere. In this embrace, the seed bank is not an isolated collection. It is part of a fabric, a cloth woven from the living and the waiting and the resting. It matters as a memory and as a cushion. Without it, meadows would be less able to do what they do so well, return to themselves after the small and the large edits of climate and grazers and time. With it, patterns persist softly. The gentle rhythm continues. Let your mind drift now to a few specific species, but keep the tone slow and low. Primroses have seeds that manage dormancy with a combination of cold and time. They fall near their parents and often wait through winter before emerging into early spring, when the grasses are still adjusting from their own winter retreat. Their seedlings find space in the freshly opened light of March and April, when many other plants are still thinking. Red clover scatters seeds that can persist for years, a small backup for the nodding heads of summer. Bird's foot trefoil, with its cheerful yellow flowers in the months ahead, contributes to the bank with seeds that resist too rapid decay by sealing their nutrients within a coat that does not yield immediately to water. Plantains, vetches, daisies, buttercups, each has its style and its time frame. Together, their seeds are a whispering assembly, not speaking loudly enough to keep you awake, but present enough to add comfort to the idea that this place holds itself in steady hands. Even how seeds endure within themselves is a story worth telling in kindness. The inside of a seed is a place where molecules are folded and locked in shapes that resist damage. Antioxidants are tucked away to absorb small jostles of oxygen that might otherwise buckle a delicate structure. Sugars are formatted into glassy arrangements in some species, a kind of non-crystalline solid that holds proteins and membranes in place during the long dry spells that seeds must withstand. There is a beauty in such engineering, and it exists not to impress, but to help the seed remain itself until water and warmth instruct it to become something more. Scarification is a gentle word for a gentle act. It means the coat is slightly abraded. Nature does this in small, polite ways. The freeze in winter makes a seed's volume change a hair. The thaw relaxes it. Repeated many times, those cycles open tiny faults. A grain of sand rubbing a seed in a shallow swirl of water during a spring rain does a little work on the coat surface. Passing through a digestive tract, the seed is bathed in fluids that tenderize. A single pass is rarely the whole story, but over the months, the coat becomes less a barrier and more a door with a generous hinge. Sometimes the coat is not the main decision maker. Some seeds are physiologically dormant, which is to say that the machinery inside is set to idle. No amount of water immediately will wake it if the internal signals are not yet in tune. These signals change over time in a measured unfurling, often guided by cold, by time itself, by the presence of specific chemicals such as nitrates or even smoke molecules. The internal switch is not hard to flip. It is just waiting for significance. The combination of cues that, over the ages, has come to be associated with a good chance for survival. The seed bank functions because each species has fine-tuned the position of its switches. The meadow functions because all these switches flicker in different patterns, some promptly, some reluctantly, ensuring that not everything moves in the same direction at the same time. The gentle rhythm continues. A subtle element of this story is how seeds, even before germination, are part of chemical conversations. The soil is a soup diluted by space and tea, and in that soup, molecules move in thin films around the seed coat. Some plants release allelopathic chemicals, an elegant way to say that their roots and residues send out molecules that can discourage other species from germinating too close. It is not a battle. It is more like a polite request for personal space. Seeds that are sensitive to those signals delay their response. Seeds that are insensitive or that naturally coexist with those neighbors move ahead instead, building combinations that have been tested by the long history of the meadow. There is tune in the quiet details of how roots discover water. Water potential in soil is not a single number. It is a spatial tapestry governed by how tightly water is held by particles of clay or silt, by how easily it moves through the pores created by aggregates, and by how much is drawn out by transpiration above. A seed's radicle begins with a gentle push, then branches when it finds moisture gradients. The mathematics of this movement is as simple as turning toward comfort. Over days, the young plant finds a set of angles that give it access to enough water to maintain turgor, to remain plumped with life. The unhurried exploration of the soil by roots is perhaps the most essential conversation between the seed bank and the living meadow. Those who emerged arise as partners with the soil structure, and that structure is itself partly created by generations of roots that came before. When day returns, the meadow above the seed bank begins to unroll a fresh script. Bees wander, the sun warms stones, dew recedes back into air. The seed bank does not wake with the day. It is not on that schedule. It moves with days that add up to numerous degree hours, with weeks that add up to seasons, with years that add up to eras. Yet, as the living meadow cycles with each sunrise and sunset, the bank is always slightly in step. Seeds in shallow layers feel the day's temperature, the soil surface making tiny waves of warmth and coolness that reach a centimeter, sometimes 2. It is enough to keep some dormancy cycles in sync, enough to keep them from waking in the wrong season, enough to remind them that their world is intact and predictable, enough even as each year is different in its small ways. Human hands lightly tending this meadow can influence the seed bank in quiet, effective ways. Mowing once a year, after seeds have ripened, but before they have all fallen, spreads a mixture of chopped stems and matured seeds like a mulch that is alive with potential. Removing the clippings or leaving them can shape the light at the soil, can alter the detail of moisture after rain, can change which seeds get what they desire. Light grazing at the right intensity creates a mosaic of short and tall, open and closed, churned and stable, which is exactly the mosaic that a diverse seed bank appreciates. The key is always timing and moderation, which suits the meditative temperament of this story. A heavy hoof at the wrong time can press seedlings into a hard fate, but a soft presence at a good time invites seeds to take advantage of tiny temporary conditions that pass unnoticed otherwise. In restoration work, People sometimes use donor meadows, moving green hay or the upper layer of a living seed bank to new ground that is well prepared and receptive. The practice is called hay strewing or brush harvesting, and it is a way of allowing the uncovering of new chapters using pages from an old book. Patterns repeat, and with repetition comes the comfort of knowing the next gentle movement. The heat of midsummer slows some germination, not because seeds are unwelcome, but because water in the topsoil becomes sporadic. Sensible seeds, in their chemical language, become conservative again until autumn brings cooler air and steadier rains, which for some species is a second window. Autumn germination is a strategy for those who are robust as seedlings under winter's quilt, who can grow a modest root and then wait low and green beneath frost and snow. In spring, those autumn seedlings will have an advantage, already in place and ready to rise early. The whole meadow is a layered timepiece. Meadow foxtail and timothy grasses have their moments. Oxeye daisies send white discs like halos into the day later than some. Knapweed in some regions, where it grows, times its contribution differently. Each one leaves seeds in the bank with a rhythm tuned to the schedule of life above ground. Abundance at one time feeds the bank with that species. Then the next year's slant of weather might reduce its success and increase another's. The balancing act remains soft and self-correcting. Even in the darkness where you imagine seeds resting, there is the slow work of decay. Not all seeds endure forever. Some will lose their viability quietly, their membranes succumbing to time, their sugars becoming too oxidized for metabolism. These seeds then blend back into soil, a mild donation of carbon and nitrogen to the waiting world of microbes. It is a closing of a circle that began in the light and has returned to the dark. And because the bank holds not one seed, but millions in a meadow, the loss of each is as unsurprising as a leaf falling in autumn. The gentle rhythm continues. Let your thoughts wander to the outer edges of the meadow where a hedgerow forms a border. Here, birds perch, and from here many seed journeys begin. Blackbirds, finches, sparrows more carry seeds back and forth from these edges into the interior. Seeds eaten are often scarified and dropped, their journey through a bird's tract ending with a gentle delivery to fertile ground accompanied by a small packet of nutrients. This process creates gradients of abundance in the seed bank. Edge-loving species find their seeds more common near hedges, while wind-spread species are more evenly distributed. Small mammals also maintain subtle maps in the seed bank by burying their caches in repeated patterns. A mouse prefers certain distances from cover, certain depths. A vole favors other spaces. The traces of their decisions map into the seed bank as if drawn in pencil, lines that remain more invisible to the eye but legible to the seeds. The result is a meadow that reshuffles itself gently from margin to center every year. You can also sense the role of the seed bank in weather events that come without anger, such as a cool spell during spring that stunts early growth above ground. In such a year, fewer plants set seed. The next year's bank receives a smaller deposit. But because it already holds a balance from prior years, the meadow's composition shifts less than it would without that reserve. The bank serves like a calm friend who has kept a bit of extra for a rainy day and offers it without fuss. Similarly, in a particularly lush season, when seed production is high. The bank accepts the windfall, storing it not as a glut, but as a reinforcement, a gentle padding for the seasons to come. Now, as we reach a quiet midpoint in our walk through this world, below the world, you can check in with your own body, the heaviness of your eyelids, the softness of your breath, the way the bed or chair holds your weight. And if you feel like whispering something to the comments so we know how the flow is landing for you, how sleepy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? The story continues softly, and we drift a little farther into the intricacies of seed biology without sharp edges. There is a category of dormancy called morphological, in which the embryo inside the seed is not yet fully developed at the time the seed is released. Such seeds complete their development in the soil, in a cold or warm phase depending on species, as if the womb shifted from inside a fruit to the blanket of the ground itself. In some cases, dormancy is double, with both a morphological and a physiological gate that must be passed one after the other. These complex sequences are not contrivances. They are common, they are organic. They ensure that the timing of emergence matches a schedule bigger than a single week of favorable conditions. Learning this does not demand attention that keeps you awake. It merely reassures that the machinery of life uses layered checks in a peaceful way that produces harmony across seasons. The seed bank also holds shapes that are the results of evolutionary co-listening. Seeds of plants that rely on ants for dispersal often bear eleosums that smell to the ant like a subtle invitation. The ant carries the seed, consumes the eleosum, and leaves the seed in waste piles or under stones, protected from some predators, placed away from intense competition. In this transaction, the seed bank gains pockets of neatly clustered seeds that share a history of ants. In another variation, the sticky burrs of some species affix to fur and drop when the movement of the animal jostles them loose. This means the seed bank collects them in lines that trace animal pathways across meadows. If you were to sample the bank in tiny squares across a meadow, the patterns you would find would be these footpaths and perches, water drifts, and wind lanes translated into the currency of seeds. Restoration ecologists sometimes turn to seed banks when they are trying to bring a meadow back from neglect. Some meadows accrue overly tall, overly dense growth of a small number of species when managed in a single mode. By adjusting management, introducing a change in mowing schedule, bringing in light seasonal grazing, reducing soil fertility by removing clippings, people nudge above-ground communities into balance. The seed bank often responds quickly, delivering a flush of species from the hidden archive that was there all along. Because the bank holds the history of more diverse times, the transition is made gentler. The meadow does not need to be replanted in a dramatic way. It only needs to be invited to speak with the full vocabulary it already possesses. The gentle rhythm continues. There is, too, the phenomenon of seed shadows, the pattern of how far seeds fall from the parent plant. Many seeds fall close, creating a dense, gentle gradient around the mother plant. Others fall farther, carried by wind or by water. The seed bank holds these gradients in its pockets, like faded shadows of plants long removed. Over years, these shadows shift and layer atop one another. Gaps open in the community when a plant dies or is eaten down. In such a space, the seed bank feels different from a foot away. Seeds that were once too far away to matter are now at the center, and the plant community has the option to recompose, and it does so with grace, without the jerks and jolts that sudden change sometimes brings. A fair part of the charm of seed banks is the timelessness within them. Measurements in experimental gardens have recovered viable seeds after decades, even more than a century, for a handful of species kept in casks of sand. Tests done quietly and meticulously with the patience that matches the subject. In the soil of real meadows, the slow dance of decay and disturbance makes such long durations rarer. But persistence across tens of years is not rare in principle, especially for certain small, tough seeds. What matters is that some fraction of seeds remain available to stitch years together, like threads that connect seasons of good flowering to seasons of quiet. If you find yourself drifting, that is fine, and perhaps welcome. You can let the words pass, like the hush of wind over grass. If you want to follow them more closely, we can wander further into how seeds measure time. The notion of degree days or thermal time is a calm tool. Seeds and plants accumulate heat over time in ways that can be counted, not hour by hour, but by how warm over how long. A seed might require a certain accumulation of coolness for dormancy to soften, and then a certain accumulation of warmth for germination to proceed. This cumulative accounting aligns with the textures of seasons, nights that cool enough to count, and days that warm enough to move the needle very slightly. The benefit is that the seed's schedule does not depend on a date, but on an experience of weather that is more reliable to its survival. Water matters in this counting too. In the language of scientists, it is sometimes called hydrothermal time, a combination of moisture and heat that you can picture as a very gentle, translucent hourglass. The water in the soil turns the hourglass over in spring, and then the warmer the soil, within a comfortable range, the faster the grains slide. The hourglass slows when soil dries and resumes when rain returns. This is the rhythm seeds have used quietly since before our calendars took their present form. The gentle rhythm continues. Alongside the cues that wake seeds come the cues that say, not yet. Some seeds are inhibited by their own parents' chemical signatures, perhaps a way to space themselves saintly and avoid crowding. Some are inhibited by too much depth. Under darker, deeper cover, they wait because emerging from such a place would cost more than their reserves can supply. Some seeds can even sense the low oxygen of waterlogged soil and choose to stay asleep until the water recedes. These are not conscious choices, but they are reliable responses to conditions that have repeated for many generations. Picture now the first autumn after a minor disturbance in a meadow where a small patch of soil was scraped open by a passerby's foot or by the edge of a tool used to clear a path. Light falls on the surface without filtering through the familiar litter. The seed bank responds. Within weeks, a flush of short-lived plants might appear, species whose seeds prefer disturbed ground. They sprout, flower, and set seeds in a single gentle season. If left alone, the next season, a different set emerges, perhaps a delicate rosette of a biennial that will hold itself low this year and rise in the next. All the while, the nearby perennial meadow plants reapproach, their seeds in the bank and their roots around the edges. Within a few years, the patch fits seamlessly again into the textures of the surrounding meadow. The bank had prepared for that, and the meadow did not need to force the issue. On a summer night, the smell in the meadows changes with temperature and humidity. Warm, dry nights carry traces of hay and honeyed flower scent. Damp nights deliver herbaceous breath. Seed bank dynamics, of course, are not moved by scent. They are moved by physical layers and steady cues. Yet, for you, listening and breathing slowly, the association is pleasant. The more you smell the meadow, the more you understand this reserve beneath your feet. In this way, your own senses begin to read the seed bank's context. This is a comfortable way to learn. You might consider a single seed's life as a meditation object, something simple to return to as thoughts wander. A seed produces itself in a flower, an ovary swelling and collecting energy, as long summer light keeps the plant in slow production. When the seed is ready, its coat hardens. The parent plant releases it when the coat is mature enough to protect and the embryo formed enough to carry on. The seed makes a modest journey to the soil, traveling in one of the many ways we have mentioned. It enters the bank with a stillness it learned on the plant. It resists water for a time, or it allows water in and then holds it carefully. It monitors the seasons gently, adjusting its internal state just a degree at a time. When its cues align, it wakes not with fanfare, but with a small change in potential. Water drawn in through membranes, internal tissues reorganized, the first cell divisions carefully made. It tests a small root, not far, just far enough to touch reliable moisture. Then it either proceeds or pauses, ready to wait again if conditions pull back. The whole life of a seed is a lesson in the usefulness of patience. Under the night sky, stars pulse behind thin cloud, or they sit steady above clear air. The meadow breathes in carbon dioxide and back out oxygen through the leaves of plants that still create some faint flow under moonlight. The seed bank in the soil is indifferent to stars, and yet, like the breath of a sleeper, it has its own cycles that follow an even larger clock. Some seeds are in the phase of maximum dormancy. Some are in intermediate stages. Some are open to the chance of a rain tomorrow. None rush, none fret about opportunities latitudes. There is another season and then another, and the accumulation of seeds across years ensures options remain plentiful. The gentle rhythm continues. Subtle differences in seed size matter in quiet ways. Small seeds can slip into small pores and travel deeper with modest disturbances. They contain less stored food and thus often need to emerge where light is abundant and competition is limited soon after their germination. Their survival depends on precise timing, which their cues are tuned to detect. Large seeds carry more food and can endure a longer trip upward through the soil if they germinate from a deeper layer. They can produce a first leaf large enough to catch sunlight even if the path to the surface was long. Large or small, each strategy has its place in the seed bank's arithmetic, which is really just the meadow's way of doing gentle accounting. Germination in the presence of others also follows patterns that feel like a soft song. If many seeds of one species germinate in a certain window, that species may dominate that corner for a year, leaving fewer spots for others to occupy. But because many species stagger their emergence times or require slightly different cues, the overall mixture remains diverse. One year favors one species, the next favors another, especially where weather patterns differ. Across a few seasons, the bank feeds this alternation, and in the long view, the meadow's diversity remains anchored, not to one year's fortune, but to the overall variability of the seed bank's openings. You may have wondered how a seed knows its depth. It does not measure centimeters. It experiences light or the lack of it, temperature swings or the lack of them, oxygen levels, and mechanical resistance. A seed near the surface feels larger daily temperature fluctuations. A seed deeper down feels constant coolness. A seed near the surface may receive light during small disturbances. A seed deeper down typically does not. These sensations are enough. Seeds that require light will not germinate in darkness at depth. Seeds that do not require light may still hesitate because their small internal stores, once used to grow a long stem to the surface, would be exhausted before the first leaves even found the sun. The seed bank thus arranges itself by gravity and by biological prudence into a vertical gradient of possibilities, which is exactly the sort of arrangement that produces stable, pleasant outcomes for the meadow. Across the continent or across continents, we would see differences in seed bank behavior that match climates and lineages. In Mediterranean climates with winter rain and summer drought, many seeds wake with autumn rains and grow through winter, resting low under frequent cool conditions and rising in spring. In places where summers bring reliable rain, seeds may wake early in spring to take advantage of long days. Yet, even if you travel, the softness of the story is similar. Everywhere, the bank is a cushion between weather and the plant community, an old friend underfoot. In the context of change across decades, the seed bank provides a slow reply. Climate warming shifts phenology. The date when flowers open sleeds. The seed rain shifts accordingly. Some species may find their old cues less reliable. The seed bank, with its stored options and its staggered dormancy, buys time for adjustment. It is not a solution to everything. It is simply a smoothing influence, a way of allowing plant communities to shift without tumbling. When combined with thoughtful stewardship, restoring lost hedgerows, timing mowing for diverse seed set, reducing soil nutrients where they have become too high, the seed bank supports transitions that are less abrupt, and the outcome is often a meadow that continues to offer a calm, layered complexity. If you're still awake with me, you might picture tiny experimental flags marking plots where different management is tried. One plot is mown early, one late, one grazed lightly, one left alone. Over a few years, researchers measure how the seed bank responds in each. They count the species and the density of seeds at varying depths. They measure which seedlings appear in spring grass as small green signatures of these experiments. The differences are not extreme. They are subtle and require the eye of long patience. Yet the trends reassure: simple, gentle changes in how we touch the above-ground meadow send clear, slow ripples into the seed bank and back out again. We can step nearer once more to the moment of germination because it is such a steady delight. The embryo senses water and begins to expand. Its cells take in water to turgidity, to a satisfying fullness. The enzymes that had been held in a kind of suspended quiet begin to catalyze reactions again at low but effective rates. The seed's coat splits at its weakest seam first, usually near the small projection that will become the root. The radicle emerges with a whiteness that is simply the absence of pigments, and it presses into soil. As it does, it senses gravity via small grains of starch in special cells that settle to the bottom, telling the root which way is down. The root produces a cap of cells at its tip that are tough enough to press through soil without harming the living tissues behind. At each step, the plant tries, pauses, and proceeds. If the soil dries, the seedling can suspend growth for a short while, protecting itself until moisture returns. A graceful tendency toward patience is built even into the tiny rhythms of first growth. When a seedling fails to reach light, you might suppose that the bank suffers, but in truth, this quiet attrition is part of the bank's design. Not every seed should germinate in the first good moment. A fraction should act. Many should wait. Failures are losses that the bank has accounted for by dispersing the timing of success. It is a smooth risk management method, but one devoid of spreadsheets or urgency. It is embodied in dormancy itself. Seeds are not isolated from seed predators, and even predation is part of the gentle loop. Ground beetles nibble, small mammals feed when storehouses are thin in winter. Predation reduces the density of seeds in the bank, which can prevent any one species from becoming overwhelmingly abundant. The meadow functions with many predator-prey cycles like this, usually mild and modest, just enough to keep numbers from extremes. It is sometimes useful to picture the seed bank as constantly being pruned, a lamp wick trimmed gently, which allows the flame above the living plants to burn steadily and without smoke. Air moves in and out of the soil through macropores, the larger channels created by roots that decayed and by burrows. During rains, water occupies these channels, then drains, pulling fresh air in behind it. This breathing moderates the chemistry around the seeds, preventing prolonged stagnation. Seeds need oxygen during germination to fuel their metabolism. The soil provides it in small pulses in a way that matches the slow intensities of germination. This pairing is not perfect every time, but it often aligns beautifully enough that a seed has enough oxygen to complete the steps it must do once it begins. After another day passes in our imagined meadow, a child might walk the edge, or an older person might rest on a low stone and listen. The meadow is a place not only for plants. It receives thoughts as well as seed rain. You are here, listening, breathing, and you are part of the gentle feedback loop as much as any animal that carries a seed in its fur. If you rest here in thought, even for the next few minutes, the seed bank becomes a companion. Its patience can be shared. Let us return to the sensation of soil in your palm. It is crumbly, smells faintly of mushrooms and leaf sugar, and is surprisingly cool. If you draw your fingertips across it slowly enough, you can sense the slight roundness of aggregate particles and the silky drag of clay smeared in a thin film. Seeds are embedded in that feel, sometimes invisible. You can pretend that you locate one by its texture, less gritty, more like the smoothness of a firm lentil. You roll it between finger and thumb and then place it back. It will exist whether you attend to it or not. In a drowsy way, that fact has a calming edge. The world contains countless small processes that run on quietly and finely tuned, whether or not you are watching. The gentle rhythm continues. If you consider now a very old meadow, one that has not been plowed in a long time, the seed bank is an elderly resident with much to share. The bank holds species that rise rarely, some that need specific conditions that only occasionally return. Perhaps a wet spring followed by a cool summer allows a species of orchid to appear from among the grasses, its seeds having been dispersed in great numbers over the years, most never finding the fungal partner upon which they rely. The seed bank does not guarantee the future presence of this orchid. It only ensures that the possibility remains suspended in the ground, ready if the constellation of required partners and conditions align. The orchid's seeds are dust fine, carried by the gentlest breath, and most will not become plants, but the few that do carry a grace that feels right in the calm economy of the seed bank. As the night leans deeper, your own body perhaps leans with it. Your head gains a better angle on the pillow. The muscles in your face relax one by one. The story continues, but requires less effort. In that state, let the meadow's conversations blend into a comfy blur. There is no exam at the end, no need to recall names, no pressure to follow each thread. The purpose is only this: a tranquil place where knowledge is soft enough to hold without tensing your grip. The seed bank's influence above ground can be more visible after disturbances larger than the usual ones, such as when a tree at the edge falls and opens a brighter patch. In such an opening, species from the bank rush quietly into the vacancy, each according to its style. Early colonizers cover soil quickly, others follow at a patient pace, eventually shading some of the first arrivals and settling the community into a new, stable form. Even this dynamic is not a fight. It is a re-threading of fabric, with threads from the seed bank wefted back into the warp of living plants. If no seed bank were present, the edge might remain bare longer, more vulnerable to erosion. With the bank's help, the ground is covered again quickly, and the life above returns to its ordinary depth. During drought years, the bank reduces its outflow. Seeds stay dormant. The field looks different. Bare patches are larger, the green is paler, but the bank bides its time. In the return of rain, seeds wake with more assurance because their reserves are intact. The meadow rises again. Seed banks do not solve drought, they soften its after-image. This softness is a recurring gift. You can remember that in some meadows below the grasses, forbs play a large role. The seed banks of these forbs, knapweed in some landscapes, scabious, betony, clovers, yarrow, differ from the grasses, offering more persistent seeds and a tendency to appear in pulses. This interplay creates the long, low waves of color that sweep through a meadow across years. One year is heavy with yellow, another with purple, another with white. The seed bank is a reservoir of these colors in waiting, like paints in covered jars on a shelf, patient and ready for the canvas when the light and time are right. As we drift toward the close of this gentle walk, let's take a last look at a few special abilities seeds hold. Some are sensitive to the pattern of day length their parent experienced, a maternal effect that sets dormancy tone. If the mother plant saw long days, it may cue its seeds to wait through winter. If it saw short days, it may prompt its seeds to wake sooner, aligning the next generation with the season that suits it. Some seeds carry bacteria or fungi inside, partners inherited from their parent that will aid in early growth. Some seeds carry subtle dormancy that cycles every few months as enzymes assemble or disassemble inhibitors, exchanging messages with time itself, circling through readiness without ever hurrying into action. All of these fine patterns come together in the seed bank, a synchronized quiet that produces each spring and autumn another verse in the meadow's untroubled song. You are free to release the details now, to let them blur into a serene murmur, while your breath remains the steady metronome. If you fall asleep, the seed bank will not mind. It is used to long pauses. If you stay with me for a few moments longer, know that somewhere, even now in a meadow you can name or in one you will never visit, seeds are listening for whether they will answer. They will do so with patient energy, and their answers will be the herbs and flowers and grasses that brush your ankles in summer, the green threads that hold soil intact after rain, the networks that feed bees and moths and butterflies, and the small creatures that return nutrients to the soil. The seed bank does not shout its importance. It is content with being enough and with being humble. The night is softer now. Crickets slow their bowing. Distant leaves turn in a comfortable sheet of sound. The earth is cool, and the meadow feels like a blanket drawn lightly over a sleeping body. Imagine yourself standing one last time and looking across it. You feel the texture of calm. The field has a low hum almost below hearing, a presence built of seeds that are quite still. Among those seeds is an entire archive of future mornings, measured and well tended. That is the unhurried life we have visited. As you return from the meadow to your room, keep the softness of its soil in your hands. Notice the small comforts around you, the curve of your blanket, the shape of the light on the wall, the way your breath warms the air. You're safe, held by the ordinary moods of night. The gentle rhythm continues. Thank you for spending this slow time with me. If this brought you ease, a like and a gentle subscribe help the channel keep releasing calm, steady videos like this. If you'd like, the playlist in the description can carry you into further quiet lessons while you drift. For now, rest well. May your night be easy and your dreams, like a meadow, be filled with simple, peaceful growth.